Hello, so here we are for the last of the mini lectures covering chapters 11 and 12. So chapter 11 deals with heroines, and Maurizio begins with a discussion of 5 traits of the heroine, which is an awful lot like the 5. In fact, it's the exact same list as for heroes. And I think that's probably an overstatement, because I think the Greeks do differentiate between female heroes and male heroes. For instance, what's okay for the male hero is often not seen as okay for the heroine. I think a better way of looking at the heroines is from a different book on mythology that I used to use by Stephen Harris and Gloria Platzner. In their version, the types of heroines that there are, the wife of the hero or the mother of the hero is the number one. This would be a figure like Alcmena, the mother of Hercules, or Andromache, the wife of Hector, would be 2 examples. The helper would be a character like Electra, who helps her brother Orestes get revenge. Iphigenia becomes a helper in the Iphigenia among the Taurians. Medea is a helper. Ariadne helps Theseus with the Minotaur. Right, those are like sidekicks. The hero impersonator is a woman who basically acts the hero in the male sense. So Lady Macbeth in Shakespeare is probably the best example that I can think of. But within the stuff we have Medea, who starts as a helper, but is in the play Medea is definitely a hero impersonator, and Clytemnestra, who kills her husband Agamemnon, would be a hero impersonator. The Bride of Death would be a young woman who dies before she gets married. This would be Iphigenia. This would be Antigone. There are a fair number of those. And then the victorious heroine is a heroine who basically wins sort of on her own terms. Penelope, the wife of Odysseus, would be an example here. There's a figure called Psyche in the story of Cupid and Psyche, who wins back her love, but sort of does it her way. Now, there is one figure mentioned who is sort of maybe the heroine version of Cleomedes. Now, Cleomedes, remember, was a guy who basically killed a bunch of school kids and then was declared a hero at Delphi, and they had to worship him. Charilla is a girl. She's like a preteen girl who is hungry, and at some sort of festival, the king is giving out food, and he's mainly giving it out to like his rich friends and people who are fairly well off. And Charilla goes up and begs for food. The king takes off his shoe and hits her with it, or she is mortally ashamed by what happens. She runs away, she hangs herself, and then bad things start happening in the city of Delphi. And because Delphi is where the oracle is, they ask the oracle what's going on, and the oracle says, yeah, you need to set up a shrine to Charilla because her ghost is angry. Remember, one of the reasons that you set up these shrines to the heroes is so that their power, which is seen to continue even after they're dead, will not harm the city, because heroes can also do bad things. The work that's looked at the beginning of chapter 11 is a section from Euripides' play Medea, which tells the story of Medea's last day in Corinth. She and Jason had to flee to Corinth, and they were exiles there for 10 years. And then Jason is going to marry, or has already married, the princess of Corinth, and Medea is sentenced to exile. But before she does that, she takes revenge on everyone. It's just sort of a revenge play. And she is very much like Achilles, right? She doesn't care, in a sense, who she hurts, because she even kills her own kids to get back at Jason. The scene that's the focus in chapter 11 is an agon, which is a word, it just means a contest, but here it's a debate. And most of Euripides' plays, I mean, we have 19 of his plays, and probably 11 or 12 of them have an agon, have a debate scene in it. The question that you have to ask yourself in a debate is, who wins the debate? Is it the person who keeps their cool and who makes reasonable arguments, or is it someone who maybe is more emotional but makes arguments that are based on truth, that they have evidence for? So in this particular thing, Medea is definitely more emotional. She does not show Greek restraint, but the evidence is on her side. Jason sounds reasonable, but for us to give Jason the victory based on his argument, we would have to say that we take him at his word, that everything he says is true, and of course that's a big if, right? Everything he says could be a lie. Euripides had a disdain for the Sophists. These were rhetorical professors. He did not like them. He felt that what the Sophists did was that they taught people how to lie. But of course, rhetorical training is important in a democracy because the only way you're going to get things done is by convincing other people to do stuff, right? In monarchy, you only have to convince the king, but or an oligarchy, you only have to convince the council. But if you've got a democratic system, you have to convince a majority of the people, which means the better you can speak, the more likely you are to win. The scholarship in chapter 11 is based on a work by Lord Raglan, so a British lord who was also a classic scholar. He wrote a work in 1936 called The Hero, a study in tradition, myth, and drama. And he said that there were 22, in what he read, and he was reading primarily classical material, that there were 22 elements to the hero. So these are things like the hero is born from, has a noble birth, comes from the upper class, from the royal family, or has a parent who's a god. The hero loses something. The hero then has to go, retrieve something. I mean, there is a series of things that are going to happen to the hero. Marianne Jezewski, who is the scholar who's sort of featured in this section, she looked at Lord Raglan's list, went through the list, and figured that 18 of the 22 also would apply to heroines. It's similar to Prop, except Prop was looking at narrative elements in Russian quest stories. Here, these are not necessarily narrative elements. Like, is the child of a king or queen or of a god? That's not really a narrative element in the story itself. Okay. The comparison section looks at Medea the way Medea is presented in Latin literature, in Roman literature. And we have two surviving works that feature Medea, Ovid's Metamorphoses. We also have another work by Ovid called the Heroides, which are fictional letters written by great heroines to their lovers, to their husbands or their lovers. So it's sort of like the female perspective on the hero's life from a distance, and we do have some letters in that from Medea to Jason. We also have, but the Metamorphoses is Ovid's most famous work. We also know that Ovid wrote a play, the Medea, which does not survive, which is unusual because we have so much of Ovid surviving, and this work, the Medea of Ovid, was considered his greatest work, which is really sort of surprising that we don't have it at all. But and we do have a play by Seneca. This is maybe 50 years after Ovid, called the Medea. Now Seneca, in presenting the Medea, largely presents Euripides' play, but for Seneca and for Romans, the key thing is you have to keep things in control. What matters for Romans is Rome. And if Rome falls, then that's a bad thing. So anyone who advances the cause of Rome, that's a good thing. Now, Medea has nothing to do with Rome, so that would not apply to her. But what she does show is she shows rage, right? She is a woman consumed by anger. And for Romans, this is not a good thing. Because if you're consumed by anger, you're not advancing Rome's mission. You're engaged in some personal vendetta. So he was also a philosopher, a Stoic philosopher, and they believed in keeping emotions in check. The Metamorphoses section from Ovid tells Medea's story, but doesn't really talk much about the time in Corinth, which is what's in the play. And my guess is that Ovid may have left it out because he himself wrote a play on Medea, and he may have left it out because it's like, we've dealt with this elsewhere. At any rate, we see Medea, in a sense, at her more heroic, self than we see her in the play by Euripides. And then finally, the Nachleben section deals with the figure of Margaret, aka Peggy Garner. She was a runaway slave. She was captured in Ohio, just across the border from Kentucky, so she had escaped from the South. She was in a free state, Ohio, when she was captured by people who went after runaway slaves. And before they could take her prisoner, she killed her daughter, who was, I think, an infant, like a toddler. And she tried to kill her sons, but they got to her before she did that, so she was unsuccessful. She was put on trial. It was a big deal. And at the time, this is in 1856, the newspapers all cast her as the African American or the black Medea because, her killing her kids. Now, of course, the story of Margaret Garner, which is a historical fact, she did actually kill, she was a runaway slave. She did kill her daughter and tried to kill her sons. The likelihood is that she herself had been raped by the master, that her daughter may very well have been the master's child, and she was determined, A, to punish him, but also to keep her daughter from what happened to her, which is she becomes a figure who can be raped at any time by the master or the master's sons. It's a little bit different than where Medea just kills her kids to get revenge on Jason. There is a reference in this section also to a play written by County Cullen, who was an African-American author, part of the Harlem Renaissance. He did a version of Medea, which is set in the Caribbean islands. And that, is an African-American styled Medea, but it is the Medea story rather than Peggy Garner's story, where they, the newspapers tacked on that label. All right, so moving on to the last chapter that we're going to look at. I mean, there is the 13th chapter, and you're welcome to look at that if you've got the time, but it won't feature into any of the tests or the like. And chapter 12 deals with quest heroes. Now, one of the things that I don't fully get with quest heroes is why we didn't get prop here, because prop's hero schema really does fit quest heroes, and so it seems like it would have been a better fit here. But I think it's because there was another work by W.H. Auden that Maurizio wanted to use. So Odysseus is the most famous quest hero. His quest is to get home, and that's the story of the Odyssey. Perseus is a famous quest hero. He goes on a quest to get the head of Medusa, and then he has some other adventures. Bellerophon is also a quest hero. He's sent on a mission, right? So quest heroes go on a mission, or they go to get something. His mission is to kill the Chimera, which he does do with the help of Pegasus. Pegasus, by the way, in film versions gets lumped with Perseus, but Pegasus is not part of Perseus' story, except that when he chopped off the head of Medusa, Pegasus was born. So Medusa is the mother of Pegasus. She had sex with Poseidon, which is in one of the versions. The reason she gets turned into this ugly monster was that she had sex with Poseidon, and when she dies, out pop a beautiful warrior, Chrysaor, and Pegasus. And why Pegasus? Because Poseidon is associated with horses. That seems to be the reason there. So, at any rate, Perseus does not actually encounter Pegasus in his adventures. Bellerophon is the one who has Pegasus as a pet. And the selections from the Odyssey come from Book 10, where he's dealing with Circe, and from Book 11, where Odysseus goes to the underworld to get some information for his journey home from Tiresias, the great prophet, in Greek literature. The scholarship in chapter 12 is an article by W.H. Auden, who is a famous British poet of the 20th century, called The Quest Hero. And according to Auden, the hero's journey resonates with us because it resonates with our lives, right? Our life is like a quest, and we go through our life, and we can sort of use the hero story as a way to reflect on our lives. Maurizio also, in this section, invokes Joseph Campbell, who also wrote about heroes. Most famously, he wrote a work called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he basically argues all hero stories, and here he mainly means quest heroes, all hero stories have the same pattern, which is departure, adventure, and return. It's worth considering. I mean, that in some ways that doesn't say much, but that does fit with Van Gennep's schema, right, for ritual, right? You're separated from your group. You have the ritual, the trial that's involved in the ritual, and then the return, where you come back to your life, but you're changed by the experience. The comparison section, like chapter 10, looks at two heroes, the Mesopotamian hero Gilgamesh and the Roman hero Aeneas. In the Gilgamesh section, we have Gilgamesh traveling. It takes him a long time to get to Utnapishtim, a man who lives at the edge of the world, which is also something that Odysseus does. He travels to the end of the world, where he meets ghosts. Right. In fact, Odysseus doesn't really go to the underworld. He travels to the edge of the world, where the ghosts can sort of exist on this plane. But Gilgamesh goes to see Utnapishtim. He's the guy who survived the flood, and he was made immortal by the gods because he survived the flood. Gilgamesh wants immortality because he witnessed the death of Enkidu. And Enkidu, who was his friend and was a great hero like him, he died of a long wasting disease. He basically just sort of got sicker and sicker and sort of died. Gilgamesh watches the body sort of decompose, and it's described in some detail, so it's pretty gross. Gilgamesh does not want that to happen. He's basically terrified of death, and so he goes to Utnapishtim to get the secret of immortality, which he does not get, right? The lesson that he gets from the trip to Utnapishtim is he cannot escape his own death. What he can do is live the rest of his life accordingly, so that he is remembered, so that he leaves behind a legacy and that he's remembered. But it's sort of personal. It's a personal thing. Now, Aeneas goes to the underworld in Book 6 of the Aeneid. He goes there to see the ghost of his dad. He also, while he's there, his dad shows him a parade of Roman heroes. Now, because the Aeneid takes place right after the Trojan War, how can he see Roman heroes, since Rome is not going to be founded for another 400 years after the fall of Troy, 400 to 500 years after the fall of Troy? How can that happen? Well, the way it's set up is there's reincarnation, and the dead Trojans will be reborn as Roman heroes down the pike. And so what he sees is these dead Trojans who are already transforming into the Romans they will become. So he gets to see this parade. Now, what's important here is for Aeneas, this is not a personal thing. I mean, seeing his dad was a personal thing, but the fact that he sees, in effect, Roman history and realizes he's a part of that, that's the key thing, right? That's for the Romans, that's the thing. For Romans, the main character in a Roman story is Rome. If it advances Rome's cause, then the figure who does that is a hero. If it does not advance Rome's cause or somehow serves as a speed bump in Rome's progress, then that person is a villain, or at least an unfortunate who thought he could somehow beat Rome. That's really the key thing. And so Aeneas, his main quality is pietas, which means a sense of duty. He knows what his duty is. His duty is to found the settlement in Italy. His descendants will eventually found Rome, and so he is a crucial part in the establishment and the all of Roman history. And his showing his love for his dad, that's also a form of pietas, because he knows where his duty lies with his dad, which is his dad's ghost appears, asks him to come visit in the underworld, and even though it's a pretty scary prospect, Aeneas does it. The final section here is the Nachleben section. Looks at African American Odysseus. Now, the main poem is a poem by Sterling Brown called "The Odyssey of Big Boy," and the Big Boy is the character. The thing about African American men in America following slavery, even during slavery, but following it for sure, is that the racial prejudice in the country made it difficult for African American men to hold steady jobs, and so they spent a lot of time traveling around to get work. This is somewhat different than the Great Migration, where African Americans as a group moved north to find employment from the rural South. That story is, the African American community saw themselves as like Moses and his people in Exodus when they leave captivity to the promised land. It turned out not to be the promised land the North did, because the people in the North were just as prejudiced as they had been, but there was at least some economic opportunities. You could get a job, for instance, at an auto factory if you were black, and your pay was at least better than what you had had. I mean, so you could build a life, in places like Chicago and Detroit, and other places up north. But this is more referring to individual black males, and they're traveling to find work. And the point is, unlike Odysseus, who is traveling to get home, there's no real home for African American men, right? They're rambling men. They're men who are always on the go because there is no ultimate place for them because of the way society is set up. So it's a darker sort of vision. It doesn't have the, Odysseus, has the benefit of privilege on his side. I mean, he has a tough time, but he's also a great prince who was a hero in the Trojan War, and so the lot of that is going to mean stuff when he's traveling around. African American men don't have that. There is a reference made to an artist named Romar Bearden. Romar Bearden did illustrations for an edition of the Odyssey where he basically used black figures. He was a collage artist, and he did these collage works showing a black Odysseus, encountering Circe on a landscape that looked more like Jamaica or something like that. So he does take the particulars of the Odyssey, but then makes them, reflect in some way the black experience. So we're now at the end of the term. Good luck. Remember, you've got, if you've only done 2 of the essays and not done 3 at this point, you need to get that third essay done. You've got the third test. You got to get the test coming up, including the final. So make sure you get that stuff done, because those are big ticket items, and you want to make sure you finish strong in the class. So I hope you've enjoyed the class. I know some people don't like the online class very much because there's not that personal interaction. I apologize for that. I tried with these mini lectures to at least try to get you some key points, and so you could see my face. So hope you have a great summer. I hope you have a great continuing academic career and life. So good luck to you all, and finish strong.